Not a single day goes by where the top level player isn't harassed about their warm-up routine. And there's a really good reason behind that. Having a good warm-up routine is crucial for getting you locked in, ready to frag out, and perform at your best. Now that that's out of the way, we can go ahead and break down the perfect warm-up routine. The single most important rule is to keep it short and sweet. You need to recognize the difference between warming up and practicing for specificity. Examples being movement, aim, whatever. I don't have any scientific data to back this up, but I believe that your warm-up routine should not exceed more than 10% of your total playtime for that session. So for example, if you plan on playing 3 hours, which I know not all of you can play, you don't want to warm up for more than about 15-20 minutes. I'd say 20 is definitely out there, but you can if you want, I guess. Generally, I'd say the sweet spot is between 10 and 15 minutes, but you know, that varies from person to person. What I will say is, from the tiny amount of research I have done, we have about an hour to 2 hours of proper concentration where we can apply ourselves fully. And after that, we sort of start to diminish a bit, so keep that in mind. Personally speaking, any more than 15 minutes and I start feeling kind of hot, my focus diminishes. So yeah, rule 1, don't sit there shooting things in the firing range for like 3 hours. It's not going to help you much, and it's boring. Sorry. Step 2, recognize your weaknesses. It's vital that you focus on your weaknesses first, because those are the things that are going to be holding you back most in-game, and most likely the things you're least familiar with. So basically, start with the hardest things first. Now, these suggestions I'm making are solely off what I've seen, both as a player and someone who likes to watch other people's content. But for controller players, I'd say arguably the best thing you can do during a warm-up is recoil drills. Not only will this help you in long-range fights, which are toughest on controller, but it'll also get you used to making micro corrections, which you're going to be using at all points in the game. Next, for M&K, which is the input I play on, what I have more experience with, what I know more about. First and foremost, I suggest some close range tracking. That is by far the hardest thing, especially if you play on a low sense. You're going to have to be making large sweeping motions left to right, and that can be pretty uncomfortable if you're not used to it. So I suggest getting used to using your entire arm, all your mouse pad, all that jazz, not just your wrist. So maybe some 360s while slide jumping, big motions both left and right, because I know we all have a preference. And then close range tracking, just sweep back and forth, doing long strafes, and getting used to that motion. Because I have seen you guys whiff your PK shots. And when you're not whiffing them, you're doing all these freaking crazy stuff. You're just flicking back and forth to look cool, and that's not efficient. Asu, please don't kill me. Next up, it's time to recognize that most fights within Apex take place at 2 engagement distances, poking range and in your face. In your face. For that reason, I suggest everybody, M&K and controller alike, go ahead and grab a car or R9, depending on your preference, and a wingman. The R9/car is to practice your close range, the wingman is to practice your long range. The reason I suggest these weapons is because they have the fastest strafe speed and require the most movement from you. So I guess in theory, it will be tougher, which will pay off in my opinion. Alright, so now that you have your weapons, you want to go ahead and stand at a moderate distance. You don't have to be 1,000 feet out where you can only use a charge rifle because the game isn't played like that. It doesn't really have a lot of use. Next, you want to pull out your wingman and you want to start strafing side to side. Now, it's not really necessary for you to shoot during this time. You don't have to if you don't want to. Really, all you want to do is keep your shot or reticle on target. So just get used to making those tiny micro corrections back and forth. Once you feel like you're warm and staying on target for the vast majority of your strafes, you can move over to the close range. Now, for close range, there's a lot of options for warming up. I'll throw out some funky ones first in case you haven't tried them and want to mess around a little bit. But something really fun that I like to do is pick Mirage, deploy a clone, do a 180, control the clone, and then practice inverted strafes. So the Mirage clone is going to be doing opposite of what you're doing. Technically, it's not too hard because you already know what they're going to do, but it feels like potentially gets me warm. You guys can try it out and let me know what you think. Next up, for funky methods, you can deploy an octane pad about this position right here, and you're just going to slide into it and practice tracking the dummy while you fly across the sky. Now, technically, the air inaccuracy is going to make it almost impossible to land all your shots, but as long as your reticle's on target, I'd say you're doing alright. And lastly, for a more conventional method, you can just perform a bunch of slide jumps with a wingman, R9, or PK, and just generally strafe around the dummy. What's important here is that you don't do a ton of micro short strafes, if you will. You want to make sure you're doing long strafes all around the dummy to utilize your entire range of motion. 4. Next up, recoil control. Everybody in Apex absolutely hates this from what I've seen. For one reason or another, most everyone in the community is extremely lazy about recoil. Either, oh, it's easy, it doesn't exist, proceeds to miss everything, or it's just a very niche thing, I'm not too interested, but I really do think it's important, and for me, it keeps me feeling very, very comfortable on all weapons at all ranges. So for this, you're going to grab your preferred weapon. I would suggest an assault rifle, so R301 or flatline. The reason I suggest these two is because these are the weapons you're going to be using at that medium range distance with the 2 times, a 3x, 2 to 4. Once you have your weapon with your optic of choice, you can go ahead and stand at a medium to long distance, something you'll actually be doing in game. Now, when you're shooting at these dummies, I actually encourage you guys to recognize the recoil pattern and try to perform it. I know a lot of people just kind of look at how their gun's shooting and do the opposite to control the recoil. So if it's going up and to the right, you go down to the left, but it's more of a reactive thing. I suggest you guys shoot the gun without controlling the recoil, see what it does, and then mirror it. If you're actively thinking about the recoil, you're going to be controlling it better. So to summarize, shoot the gun without controlling the recoil, think about that recoil pattern, now do the inverse on the dummy. At first, I suggest you guys just focus on one weapon. For me, it was the flatline. Next up, the 301. Now, the reason I separated these two and didn't train them at the exact same time is because they are opposites. They feel different. I think it's a much better use of time to master one, get that in your brain, and then go off to the next one. Now, what I've realized is heavy weapons all kind of have this up and to the left recoil pattern, and light weapons, for the most part, have an up and to the right. So once you kind of know that, you can think about it when you pick up a gun, and if you want to beam someone at range, you already know what to do. Warm-up drill number 5. A simple movement warm-up routine. For this, I just kind of mess around, utilizing slide jumps, holstering, wall bounces, tap strafes if you're into that, and zip jumps. For this, I kind of advise you guys to use your imagination a little bit. Get behind a piece of cover, do a little spray, duck into cover, holster, slide jump, and smack your target in the face with a PK. Or a wingman. I mean, you can keep the initial loadout if you want. Warming up your ability to effectively holster, I think, is grossly underrated. It's a mechanic you use all the time, and I see a lot of people, especially controller players, no hate towards you guys, that do not holster their weapons. And if they do, they're not doing it optimally. Doing this will increase your uptime, your aggressiveness, and make your enemies feel significantly more oppressed. A good little drill for this is to start running with your gun out, holster it, slide jump, and then while in the air, pull out your weapon, take a shot, repeat. Do that over and over and over again until you get really comfy with it. As for warming up your wall hops, that's pretty self-explanatory. Recently, I started doing infinite wall hops, like the jump fatigue wall hops. Those are really fun to warm up, and I noticed I do need to do it. If I just try to do it in-game without any sort of practice beforehand, I end up flopping them a lot and can't utilize them. Last but not least, zip jumps. These are extremely polarizing. You either love them or you hate them. I wouldn't go super ham on these while doing a warm-up. Really just practice jumping up, doing a 180, jumping off. You don't need to do anything crazy. Really, you just want to do this to make sure that if you're playing on World's Edge, you're not absolutely lost and just fumbling every little movement. Especially for those of you who haven't played World's Edge in a minute, I suggest you do this because it feels so bad getting lost on ziplines. Anyways, I hope this warm-up routine helped you guys. I know it wasn't a perfect video, so feel free to let me know how I can improve it later on. And if there's anything else you guys want to know, have a good day and peace.